on the 31st of October every year. I lock my doors and ignore the children who knock at my door for candy. I hate the holiday so much, as it makes me relive hell, and the horrific tale you're about to hear will tell you why. I had just bought a newly remodeled house, and as I stood in the hallway of my new home, only 2 words ran through my mind. It's beautiful. I had been eyeing the house for a while now, and immediately after I got an opportunity to buy it, I did. The house wasn't only beautiful, it had a reasonable price too. There had apparently been a few strange incidents with the house in the past, most of which I didn't know the details of. However, due to those incidents, the house's value had drastically reduced, which was one of the many incentives to get it in the first place. I didn't really care about the crazy things that had happened with the house in the past, as I knew I was going to make new and happy memories there. Buying the house and moving into a new neighborhood was the beginning of a fresh start for me and my 2-year-old son, Jamie. Being a single father wasn't easy, but my little boy was the light of my life, and I swore to give him the best that I could. The first few months were perfect. I had completely settled down, and I made a lot of friends around the neighborhood. After the summer, autumn was fast approaching, and with it, the Halloween season. Decorations began to go up, and I became excited to spend my first Halloween in the new neighborhood. It was on the 31st of October, 1998. The day started out great as people in costumes filled the streets. By the time it was 5:30, I began to hear knocking at the door. I opened the door to see the cutest children in costumes. They all had big smiles on their faces as they said, "Trick or treat." I gladly obliged, and I gave them as much candy as they wanted. As the hours passed by, the knocks on the door just kept coming. I didn't complain as the sight warmed my heart, and I began to think how adorable Jamie will be when he's old enough to dress up and go out for his trick-or-treating. I kept giving candy to the children till it was really late, and at around 10 p.m., the knocks on the door had stopped. I was also finally out of candy, so I decided to call it a night. I turned off the lights in the living room before going to put my son to bed. After that, I brushed my teeth and I went to bed. I'd only been asleep for a few minutes before I was abruptly awoken by loud knocks at the door. I looked at the clock beside my bed, and it was 12:01 a.m. I was shocked as I wondered who could be knocking at this hour. I eventually went down to check, and when I opened the door, I saw a strange child holding a bag of candy. It was dark, so I couldn't make out the little boy's face, but I could tell something was off with this child. Before I could say anything, the child looked me dead in the eye and said, "Trick or treat." I could tell there was something wrong with his voice as it sounded a bit distorted. I was also completely baffled to see a child out this time without his parents, so I said, "It's really late, buddy. Where are your parents? You should get on home. I'm already out of candy." As I said before, I couldn't see the child's face well, but I could tell that he was angry at the fact that I didn't have any candy to give. I then watched him bring out a shiny object and repeat the words. Trick or treat. I couldn't make out what it was, but it looked like the child had brought out a toy knife. I chuckled at his attempt to threaten me before saying, "You know, it's not nice to threaten people with knives, even if they're fake. The knife is supposed to match your costume, and it's not supposed to be used for threatening people who don't have candy to give. It's not safe out here, kid, and this really isn't the time for scary pranks." The child didn't respond at this time, as he just stood there staring at me with a hint of anger in his eyes. I assumed he was still trying to pull a prank on me, so I told him to go back home again before closing the door. I made my way upstairs, thinking about how odd the experience I just had was, but before I could reach my room, I began to hear noises coming from my living room. Thinking there were burglars, I rushed down to see what was going on, but when I reached there, I saw the child that I'd just seen outside standing in my living room. Horrified, I screamed, "How the hell did you get in here? I'm calling your parents now, and you're gonna be in so much trouble, young man." Before I could reach my phone, the child charged at me. I wanted to attack, but I hesitated because I didn't want to hit a child, and that's when I felt a sharp pain in my left leg. I looked down to see the child had stabbed me through my leg with a jacket knife, and now he was trying to take my entire leg off. The pain was unbearable, but I managed to kick the boy away, and that's when I realized that the person in my house wasn't a child. I could tell by the force of the kick and the weight of the intruder that it wasn't a little kid. I could see his face a bit better now, but I couldn't recognize it. I then watched the man run towards the back of the house. I tried to follow, but the blade was still in my leg and I couldn't move well. A few seconds after he'd left, the smell of fuel started to fill the room. I then saw the man take out a lighter, and before I could utter a single word, my entire house went up in flames. It was a wooden house, so within seconds, the fire had spread everywhere, and I was surrounded by flames. I watched in horror as my home began to burn. I looked around for the man, but it was as if he had disappeared into thin air. I then began to hear little screams from upstairs, and I realized my son was still in his room, so I screamed out his name before rushing upstairs to his room. Every step I took sent unbelievable pain through my body, but I didn't care. I had to save my son. Before I could reach the door, a huge chunk of burning debris fell from the roof and blocked my path. I tried to maneuver the blockade, but there was no way around it. I tried to get back down the stairs to get some help, but the stairway was blocked too. The flames were everywhere now, and the ceiling had begun to crumble around me. In that moment, I felt nothing but pain and despair as Jamie's screams filled the house. There are no words to explain how I felt hearing my own son die and not being able to do anything about it. The smoke began to rise and breathing became extremely hard. I then started to choke as I fell to the floor. The world around me then started to fade away, and as I was about to give in, I felt strong arms grab a hold of me and pick me up from the floor. The following seconds were a blur, but before I knew it, I was out of the house and surrounded by firefighters. As they took me away from the house, I screamed, "My son is still inside! Please help him!" The firefighters tried to go back in, but the house had already started to collapse on itself, and I knew it was hopeless. As I watched the house crumble with my son in it, I felt a piece of me die, and I couldn't do anything but cry my heart out. I was eventually rushed to the hospital to remove the blade that was still in my leg. I had already lost a lot of blood, and while the doctors were able to stop the bleeding, they weren't able to save the leg. This period was the worst time in my life, as all I felt was constant grief and pain. It wasn't long before my grief turned into anger, as I always cursed the person who was responsible. The authorities had already gone through the remains of my house, and they found and retrieved my son's charred corpse. As messed up as it sounds, I was hoping the intruder had died in the deadly fire he started, and knowing he escaped filled me with rage. I begged the authorities to do everything they could to find him and bring him to justice. I was later told to describe the individual I'd seen to the police sketch artist to help them start the investigation. I tried my best to properly describe every detail I could remember, as I didn't see his face well. It took us about 3 hours for the sketches to be finished, and when it was done, the man was identified as Nikolai Anatoly, a wanted serial killer who was widely known as the Bloody Midget. Nikolai was a 40-year-old deranged killer that measured a little over 4 feet. He had been at large for the last 6 years, and the authorities had been looking for him all over the country. The police record showed that he usually killed his victims by cutting off their legs and letting them bleed to death. Many detectives who worked on the case believed Nikolai was one of the most disturbed killers they had ever come across, as they found out the reason he cut off people's legs was because he wanted to bring everyone down to his size. That explained why he attacked my leg with a knife. Additional police records also showed that Nikolai was very active during Halloween, as he would often dress up as a child and kill unsuspecting adults who opened their doors for him, in addition to many defenseless children who were out trick-or-treating. He had already killed over 53 children and 34 adults. These records would also reveal that Nikolai Anatoly and his uncle, Dominique Anatoly, had lived in my house in the early 90s. The pair often terrorized the neighborhood, and during an altercation with the police, Dominique was killed and Nikolai fled. From that day, Nikolai had carried a grudge against that particular neighborhood and the people who moved into the house after it was taken from him and his uncle. That's why he targeted my house, as he usually terrorized the people who had lived there in the past. This was apparently one of the reasons why the house was sold cheaply, as due to the repeated violent incidents with Nikolai, not many people wanted it. After learning all this, I immediately blamed myself for not looking into the history of the house I bought or the area I was moving into. The guilt was unbearable, but the authorities calmed me down by telling me it wasn't my fault, and they assured me that they would do everything they could to find Nikolai and bring him to justice. A massive manhunt was then carried out in the surrounding area to find Nikolai, but no matter how hard the authorities tried, Nikolai was never found. I held on and waited for justice for a very long time, but it never came, and after burying my son, I left my town to pick up the pieces of my life somewhere else. Every day is a constant struggle, and I've thought about ending it all, but I have to live to remember my son, Jamie. The 31st of October is coming up once again, and to those who are hearing this, I warn you, be careful who you open the door to this Halloween, because it's not only little children who roam our streets looking for candy. The story you just heard was loosely based on the real-life case of Bradley Chopper Smith. Born on the 5th of July, 1911 in San Diego, California, Bradley Smith is the only documented midget serial killer in the United States history. His recorded height was 4 feet 2 inches, and he weighed about 80 pounds. During his active years, Bradley was given a disturbing nickname by the authorities. They called him the Chopper, because he would murder his victims and mutilate their corpses by chopping off their legs at the knees. Detectives stated Bradley was a very psychologically disturbed man who wanted everyone else to be a midget. He often targeted people who were larger than normal height because he wanted to bring them down to size. Numerous investigations revealed he had brutally killed a total of 31 people over the height of 6'2". These records also showed Bradley used a variety of weapons to kill his victims, but his favorite murder weapon was a chainsaw, as he enjoyed cutting bodies with them. Ironically, Bradley would later die at the blades of a chainsaw on the 11th of October, 1949, at the age of 38. The detectives' records show that he apparently stumbled on a victim he was dismembering with his chainsaw, causing him to be impaled in the frontal lobe with the chainsaw's blades. Till today, Bradley Chopper Smith is still considered by many detectives to be one of the cruelest serial killers the United States has ever seen. Halloween. When this time of year comes around, I always have get-togethers and parties with my friends where we celebrate this spooky date. I must admit, this is one of my favorite holidays, although it wasn't always that way. When I was a kid, I never wanted to go to any Halloween party, and I didn't go out trick-or-treating with my friends. I used to stay home and watch horror movies. I was very scared, so I don't remember why I watched them so much. I was happy with this lifestyle, until something happened, and I never wanted to spend Halloween at home again. That day I was at home on Halloween night. I was babysitting my younger brother while my parents took my other brother with his friends to a Halloween party. I was already 13 years old, so I could be left alone. Nothing could have prepared me for what was coming next, though. My parents were gone, and my brother had fallen asleep on the couch. I was watching Friday the 13th, the typical Halloween movie. I was kind of bored since I had seen that movie several times, and Jason wasn't a really scary villain. I was distracted, looking at the ceiling, until something caught my eye. Someone was tapping on the window next to me. Who could it be? The window was covered with a curtain, so I couldn't see who it was. It could be a child, but I was no fool. I knew that approaching this window at this time of night was a big mistake, especially on Halloween night, when a bunch of teenagers were sure to try to scare me. I kept watching the movie, ignoring the sound, but to my surprise, the sound continued. The banging went on, and after a few minutes, I had had enough. I decided to put on a horrible mask of terror and went to the window. When I opened the curtain, I was going to be the one to scare the person on the other side. I heard a few seconds more as someone knocked on the window and laughing in anticipation. I suddenly opened it and threw myself towards the closed window with my mask. And that's when I got my first surprise. There was no one on the other side. What? How is this possible? I opened it as soon as I heard the knocking. Suddenly, someone started ringing the doorbell at the main entrance. Normally, I would think that these were just other kids asking for candy. But after what had just happened, I was scared. I slowly approached the door, inspecting from afar to make sure the key was in place. Once I was there, I pulled back the window curtain and reached out to see who was behind it. To my surprise, no one was there. When I turned around, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was a person with a pumpkin for a head. Even though I couldn't see his eyes, it was easy to tell that he saw me perfectly, since his head was pointing straight at me. As soon as he realized I was looking at him, the hideous man knocked on the window again, calling out to me to open it mockingly. In desperation, I ran to the seat and woke my brother. When he opened his eyes, I looked at the window again, and he was gone. My brother was still somewhat small and innocent, so when I told him what had happened, he didn't need any proof that what I told him was real. He was as terrified and scared as I was. My first reaction was to call the police and run away, but I didn't have time because I heard something from the kitchen. Oh no, the back door. Mom and Dad told you to lock it. I know, I forgot. Let's go, now. At this, we both started running up the stairs to lock ourselves in my room. Once we got inside, I closed the door and started to lock it with furniture. We were on a locked second floor and the doors were totally blocked. There was no way anyone or anything could get in and hurt us. Had that man broken the generator? I stood there nervous, thinking about my next move. The place was really very dark, as if the darkness and blackness had devoured all the light in the place for total darkness. At that moment, I was calmer because I knew he was probably doing this to intimidate me, since there was no way he could enter the room on his own. My mischievous smile stopped instantly when I saw something walk around the room from one side to the other. This was not my brother, as his body was like this and he was next to me. It was something bigger, much bigger. For some reason, my eyes could not adjust to the darkness and I still could not see. Nor was it time to remove the furniture that covered the door, because the moment I did that, this strange silhouette would surely do something to me. Suddenly, something grabbed my feet from under the bed and started pulling, trying to pull me under. I tried as hard as I could to stop it, but it was no use. The force was really too much. I could see how the hands that were pulling me were fat, black, and hairy. Like under the bed, there would be a demon pulling me into the depths of hell. Instead, the pumpkin-headed man stared at me. His terrifying dark eyes pointed at me. In a last attempt to get out, I kicked as hard as I could towards the pumpkin, but nothing worked. I could only watch as the thing that wanted me under the bed kept pulling until it got me. Suddenly, a ray of light invaded the whole room. It was my parents. I looked in the direction of the bedroom door, and they opened the door despite the obstacles with great ease. Maybe that door was not ready to stop anyone. I told them everything that happened, and concerned, they told me that I was alone all night and that what I was seeing attacking me did not really exist. I tried to tell them that my brother saw everything, but they told me that I did not spend the night with my brother. They took him away. I was really alone in the house. Nervous and thinking I was going to go crazy, I sat down and let my parents tell me what they wanted to tell me. On Halloween last year, I suffered a drunken attack from my uncle at a Halloween party. At that time, he was supposed to keep me and my brother, but he kept drinking until he tried to beat up my brother. For interceding, I took the beating. At that moment, I was proud that I did it, because if my little brother had been beaten as I had been, he might not be alive. Do you want more details of what happened that night? The man was in disguise at all times. Do you know what? A man with a pumpkin head. When my parents came home, they had a big fight, and my uncle ended up in jail. I had to be hospitalized quickly, and although my body eventually healed, my head did not. I spent the first few days thinking I saw my uncle ready to attack me. A few moments later, I would remember everything that had happened, only to forget it all a few hours later. With time, I began to feel better. But what neither I nor my parents knew was that being on Halloween would take me back to that night, and it would all start over again. Today, I am an adult. I would be lying to you if I said I'm completely over it. I mean, I still have some nightmares from that horrible night, and I really prefer never to leave my kids alone. I go to every Halloween party I'm invited to, and I take my kids. I was never going to be left alone on that day again. My uncle got out of jail soon after, but some offenses made his sentence get bigger and bigger. He never apologized. Want a moral of what happened? Have fun on Halloween. Don't be afraid to do what you like. The real monster does not appear on these dates, but is with you every day. The monster is always a human, and it can be anyone, even a member of your family.
This is based on a true story. This is a very scary incident that happened to me exactly a year ago on Halloween. You know how everyone is excited to celebrate Halloween, right? Now multiply that excitement tenfold because you know it's your senior year, and next year you and many of your friends may or may not get together to celebrate again. So now I'm in college celebrating Halloween with my new friends. But everywhere I go, I can't help but think about last year's Halloween, and I get the creeps. So this is what happened. I just got my driver's license, and I didn't have my own car, so I borrowed my dad's to go to a party. I'd just broken up with my girlfriend, so I was looking forward to the party. My dad was a pretty chill guy. He knew I'd need the car and had taught me to drive himself, so he was confident that I was a good driver. So he let me use his car whenever I wanted. He was also my good friend, so I never got into any kind of trouble. He was the first person I always called. Unlike other kids in my school with absent or shitty fathers, I considered myself pretty lucky. So around 6 in the evening, I drove to one of my friends' houses where we were having the party. Although no one except a few of my close friends had arrived, we decided to start the party early. Just a few of us, all seniors, enjoying the last Halloween by ourselves. We had a few drinks. I know underage drinking is illegal, but we didn't care. We wanted to have fun, get wasted, and make memories. Soon 6 turned into 7, and 7 turned into 8, and every square inch of my friend's house was occupied by drunk teenagers dressed as various characters and dancing to loud music. I was having the best time of my life. Me and my boys were dancing, drinking, and taking selfies and whatnot. Around 1 in the morning, the party started to slow down. Many kids were leaving, especially the juniors, and I decided to leave as well. Even though we didn't have school the following day, I knew I had to get home at some point. I wasn't so drunk that I wouldn't be able to drive. I said goodbye to all my friends and started driving my father's car back home. Now, you must know we didn't come from a big town. It's a small place on the foothill of the Rocky Mountains. So forest and wildlife are part and parcel of the life of folks living in my town. Every other day you'd hear news of someone hitting an animal while driving through the town. This was because we were so close to the woods. My house in particular is a bit secluded from the rest of the town, as my parents preferred privacy over convenience. So I was on the road at around 3 a.m., and as I drove closer to my home, nothing but dense trees were lining the road, and only the headlights of my car illuminated it. Now, you must know I had driven on this road long enough to know every single turn and speed bump. So when something suddenly crashed into the right side of my car and veered my car into the opposite lane, you can imagine how scared I was. I was shaking as I barely managed to stop the car from going off the road. I just sat in the car, still for a minute or two, just grasping what had happened just a few moments before. Although I knew this area was prone to such accidents, I wondered which animal had crashed into my car that almost knocked the vehicle off the road. Also, the animal must be lying somewhere nearby, probably extremely injured. I jumped out of my car to check out the damage, and oh my God, the car's hood and most of the right side had a huge dent in it. It was a miracle that the headlights were still on and illuminating the road before me. I pulled out my flashlight and checked out the whole car. There were no more dents or scratches anywhere, but I knew the repairs would cost my parents a small fortune. Then I started looking for the animal that hit me. Was it a big deer or a moose perhaps? It was quiet out there, so I tried to hear the cries of an injured animal, but I heard nothing. Finally, I decided to call my dad. It was pretty late, but I knew my dad would pick up. after about 3 rings, he did. "Hey, son, did you forget your keys again?" he said in a sleepy voice. No, Dad. I'm on my way back, and I think an animal hit the car." "You got into an accident?" Now he was all alert. "Well, I'm not hurt or anything. I couldn't see what hit the car, but it sure was a big animal, as it almost knocked the car off the road. I barely managed to stay on it." In the background, I could hear him get up from the bed and walk into the living room. "I'm video calling you right now." With that, he cut the call. A second later, we were on the video call. I started showing Dad the condition of the car and the big-ass dent on the hood and the right side. "Hey, son, you didn't tell me you'd be bringing a girl home." I knew he'd be pissed that I got into an accident, but right now he was teasing me? "What girl, Dad? What are you talking about? I'm alone out here." I was alone in the car and on the road as well. There was no one with me. I opened the passenger side door, which was smashed as well. "She's pretty. Is she from your school? Were you dropping her off at her place after the party?" Dad asked me. "Dad, what are you talking about? I don't get it." I was seriously confused, as this was not the time nor the situation to joke. Something changed in his expression, and he suddenly became serious. "Okay, son. Yeah, the car is pretty beat up, but don't worry. I need you to sit in the car and wait for me. I'll get Tony's towing to pick you and the car up. I'll be there in a few minutes. Stay put." "Sure, Dad. Thanks. You're the best." And with that, I ended the video call and sat in the car. Almost 20 minutes later, I saw 2 big headlights approaching my car from a distance. I knew it would be Dad and Uncle Tony, our neighbor who owned a towing company. I got out of the car and stood waiting for them. The first thing my dad did was hug me and checked if I had any injuries. "I'm fine, Dad. I'm not hurt." "Well, I'm glad you're okay. Let's get you and the car out of here." Dad and Uncle Tony hooked up the car to the back of the truck, and we got into the truck and drove home. When we reached the house, Mom was still fast asleep, but instead of going straight to bed, I asked Dad what he meant by bringing home a girl. He looked at me for a minute with a serious expression I couldn't decipher. "Were you just joking with me back there?" "Sit down, son. There's something I need to tell you." I sat down as he had asked. "Now, I didn't tell you this on the video call because I didn't want to freak you out, but when we were on the video call and you were showing me the car and all the damage, I saw a beautiful girl standing right behind you. Then when you opened the passenger side door, the girl was right there, sitting on the passenger seat. But you kept on saying that you were alone, and most importantly, you looked so confused when I mentioned the girl. So I decided to let you be instead of telling you the truth. Plus, I wanted you to be safe. That's the reason I asked you to sit in the car instead of waiting on the road for me. I don't think any animal hit the car, son. It was something else." As soon as I got off the phone, I walked up to Tony's, all the while praying for your safety. I just wanted you to be safe. Now, go to bed and we'll talk more about it in the morning. I was so stunned that I just went to my room and crashed on my bed. That night I had a dream of the accident. Only this time I had a beautiful girl sitting in the passenger seat. And as soon as the thing or the animal hit the car, the girl died on impact, and her limp body just lay there in the seat while I remained unscratched. The next morning, I saw my dad waiting by the car, and to my surprise, the car was as good as new, with no dents, no bumps, nothing. My father told me that no one had fixed the car. It was so weird and confusing and scary. After that incident, I never drove the car alone after 10 in the evening. And now, almost a year later, I still dream about the accident and the girl.